Hello and welcome to Jeff Shrimpton's One Giant Leap podcast. This week I have an award-winning serial entrepreneur and business coach, Gary Keating. Say hi, Gary.
Hi guys.
Thanks for coming on the podcast, Gary. The reason I wanted you on is I've heard you tell your story before, and it's really inspiring. In fact, your story is featured on this podcast before because it's been that inspiring that other people that I've interviewed have referenced it.
Oh, right. I need to get some royalties going.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'd love for the audience to hear about your story and how you became a successful entrepreneur. But like every good story starts at the beginning. So do you want to tell us about your beginnings, Gary?
Okay. Yeah. I guess if you go right back, I was brought up in a council house estate in Bristol, and my first, I guess, like everyone did, the paper round bit. We people always say we had no money. I mean, we had no money. We had no money. We never had my mum and dad never had a car. I was always, that for me, the first sign of success when I was a kid was going to be, I'm going to get a car. But the first real sign of success was, I suppose, I'm going to go in a car, because it was bus or walk, and more often than not walk. But my first gig outside of that was, when I was younger, as my mum reminded me, I used to do little fetes in the garden. So people would come in, give I guess a sixpence then or whatever to come into the fete. And I'd have like,
you're not that old, are you, Gary?
I think I might be. They've had like the cocktail stick with the little color bit on it to get it out. They'd win something, or maybe pennies. I don't know. Then my mum told me I got on the bus, and I can't remember this really, but I got the bus down. They thought I didn't know where I'd gone, down to Bristol city centre, and I sold my records for cash. I don't know what I did with that cash. I started playing the piano. Started playing the piano in the pubs in Bristol, piano and the organ in the clubs in Bristol when I was about 11 or 12. I left home when I was very young and went to live in a caravan site in Weston-super-Mare. The reason I went is because I was doing a gig playing in the caravan site there at Weston-super-Mare, and in those days, before internet, Jeff, you see that's how old I am. Well, I suppose internet was around, but I wasn't around then. Or I didn't have it then. In the Bristol Evening Post, which is a local paper, an advert came up, music shop for sale. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. And actually, it was in Worrell, which is a place just before Weston-super-Mare. So I got the bus over. Met the two people there, John and Jill, and they were very typical of quite a lot of people that I meet now when I'm coaching. They've been in business for over 22 years. They were selling the business, but they couldn't sell it. The business was them. It was all about them. They sold the pianos, sold the organs, delivered them, did the accounts, did the books, did the phone calls, looked after the customer queries, did even the teaching sometimes. So we sat down and we spoke, and they wanted, I remember it, at the time, they wanted £154,000, which was, not an insignificant amount of money then. And they were selling the freehold of the shop, the stock, the goodwill, and the van. And we started talking, and basically after about, I don't know how long it was, maybe about 9-10 months or even a year, I must have been 17, because I remember driving my test, passing my driving test. And I remember going over and talking to him, and John sat me down and they said, Gary, how much money have you got? Because you've been talking about buying this business for a long time. And of course, nobody else had offered to buy it. So I said, okay, so I just want to check. You're selling the shop, you're selling the stock, you're selling the goodwill, and you're selling the van. It's 154. How much is the van? At which point there was this, well, what's the relevance? And I said, well, just wondered, how much is the van? And they said, well, it's worth 650. I said, okay, if you could make it 600, I can buy the van. At which point there was this huge pause. And I said, however, what I can do is I will rent the shop with an option to buy over 5 years. I'll sell your stock, put 15% on the trade price of the stock. So therefore, eventually you would have sold the freehold of the shop, you would have sold the stock, you would have got 15% for the goodwill, and I'll buy the van. Now, I'd like to tell you that what happened was they went, oh, that's fantastic, put their arm around me, we shook hands, and it all ended well. I won't swear on your Zoom call, but John and Jill, even Jill herself, there were a lot of expletives, and it was like, get out the shop and don't ever come here again. So about 3-4 weeks later, I was in the caravan site playing in the social club bit there, and there's a phone call. You've got to ring these people, John and Jill, and I rang. And he said, "Come over here now." And I went over and we sat down, and basically we shook hands. We did a deal, and I bought the van for 600. On the way out, he put his arm around me, and I thought, oh God, I didn't know if he's going to congratulate me or strangle me. Actually, he said, I remember him saying it so well. He said, a council house boy who's 17 does not come and put that deal on the table. They just don't do it. What's the score? And I explained to him that there was a guy who I'd gone to see, and it was referred to me by Barclays Bank, was in Union Street in Bristol, and the bank manager referred me to this guy, and he was an ex-director of I can't remember, one of the oil companies. I think it might have been Butler Oils. Anyway, his name was John Oyler, funny enough, and I gave him £500 for business advice, how to start a new business, when I was teaching the piano and the organ and playing. And that was that was literally the only 500 quid that I had. And he gave me the advice. That's how I could buy this music shop. And that's why I kept going back to the shop.
You were certainly persistent with them, weren't you?
Yeah. And, I think persistent is persistent and I persevered. And I think persistent is important for business owners, Jeff, but I think perseverance is the winner. You can be persistent in what you're doing, but sometimes when you're persistent, at some point somebody's going to say no. But nobody can take away your perseverance. Persistent is trying to get a result. Perseverance is ours, not theirs.
Yeah. So
perseverance is, to me, is a much, much bigger game to play than persistent. You see, I can persistently do something, and that's that could be to one extent that could be the definition of insanity, couldn't it? Persistently doing the same thing and expecting a different result. But perseverance to be successful is non-negotiable. It's
interesting. I've never thought through the difference between those.
So but they're very important to me, because I've persistently done a lot of wrong things. If you want a lesson, if you'd like a lesson on, how to fail in business, I can give you some really good pointers there. And what I mean by that is, I've learned more from that than ever I did from any of the positive things, because you know what to avoid. Things like, being inflexible. Got to be flexible. John and Jill in those first period, they weren't inflexible. So if you want to fail, be inflexible. So
tell us
anyways.
You got your business. You're in the door.
Got in there, did the deal. Within 5 years, we had 8 music shops, 3 music academies. I won the UK Young Businessman of the Year award. It was all over the newspaper, the Bristol newspapers. Council house boy becomes multi-millionaire. And we had the 8 shops, etc. So what do you think happened 2 years later?
You retired and went and sat on a desert island and sipping pina coladas, and everything was brilliant.
Absolutely. I think we can finish the Zoom there, because you nailed it, mate. I'm bored. I lost it all. And at the time, I would have told you it's because of Barclays Bank, HMRC, VAT, the accountant, the bookkeepers, the staff, the Panasonic, Yamaha, the musical instrument suppliers, the landlords, the council tax or business rates. But the reality is, or even interest rates, even Margaret Thatcher at one point. But the reality is that wasn't the truth. What do you think the truth was, Jeff?
You didn't manage your cash properly?
No, I was a pretty good musician. I was pretty good at borrowing money. And I was actually pretty good at selling. But what do you think was the center point of the truth of why it failed? What didn't I know?
Was it about how to manage the whole thing, put it all together and execute on the plan?
I didn't know how to run a business. You see, I thought being a good musician or being even a good salesperson, I think, by the way, if you're in business, you're in sales. But I actually thought that by being a good musician, it was suddenly and miraculously make me a good business person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's rubbish. What I learned was that there was a massive gap between your skill or even what you love to being able to run a business, because that's the product. This is running the business. The business is pretty independent of that. And what I also learned then was you know, this has stayed with me for the rest of my whole life, is the language of business is logic. We might sell on emotion. We might, you know, it might be an emotive thing, but if I come into my business on a Monday morning and I go, I feel terrible, my business is going to go, it doesn't recognize that. It only recognizes metrics. The language of business is logic. And I bring all this emotion into something which just wouldn't change. The figures, the facts would not change, because the language of business is logic. We sell on emotion. We work with our teams on emotion, but you can't take away that logic.
So sometimes we have to say to people whether they might be feeling optimistic about their business at any point. It's like, okay, well, tell that to your bank account, because it doesn't agree.
Exactly. Yeah, it does. You know, it's pure metrics, and so it doesn't matter how I feel, great or bad. That's the fact. And therefore, what was important to me, I thought, right, okay, so I kind of learned that lesson. So I did what every broke musician does, which is, I didn't go bankrupt. Actually, I paid back a certain amount of what we owed over 7 years. But I did what every broke musician does, which is what?
Go back to playing the piano.
I thought you were going to say busk. Actually, I was going to say no. I was a bit better than a busker. No, I sold life assurance.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Come on, it's obvious, right?
Yeah.
So I started selling life assurance in Bristol. I was working for a business, and that business had about £180,000 worth of debt. I think we were down a couple of million at that point on the music side. So it had £180,000 worth of debt, and I said, I'll buy it for £1. I'll buy the business for £1. And my friend said to me, why would you buy a business for £1 when there's £180,000 worth of debt on it? I said, where I've come from, that's nothing. So we bought it, was successful, built it up, opened up 3 offices, sold that business and moved to Hong Kong.
Before we move on, tell me about the conversation you had with the journalist after you went bust.
Oh yeah, so we were so many years ago. There was I won't mention her name, but she was on HTV West, and she had married a quite a famous comedian in the UK. And as I was a musician, I knew this comedian, but they'd also got divorced. And we were on live TV, so it was a bit of a nightmare because we. How can I describe it? She had not a hidden agenda, but she wanted to ask the questions which would really penetrate. And my family would be all watching, and all of Bristol. And she said, Gary, so this has happened to you. What's it like to be a failure? And I said, call her name Mary. I said, Mary, I don't know what it's like to be a failure. I'm not a failure. I just don't have very much money at the moment. And we have to remember that. We have to absolutely remember that, if you haven't got very much money, it doesn't make you a failure. What makes you a failure is inside there. It's the mindset. None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes, and if we didn't make mistakes, we wouldn't be going fast enough and we wouldn't be going large enough. But I wouldn't accept that was a failure. I just didn't have very much money at the moment. And so I decided, not because of that radio interview, but I decided, I've been learning the wrong thing. I need to learn how to run a business. And that's what I decided to dedicate those last years. We started Scribbles, which is a stationery business. We had an Idle Home exhibition. We just, once you really get how to run a business, you realize that the product, be it a mouse, be it time, be it whatever, it's almost secondary, because you just got to fit the product in and put the marketing around. And this is why so many people that we've coached at the moment are pivoting, because they've been able to pivot, because it's okay. We know we've learned with Action Coach, we've learned how to run doing before. So we moved to Hong Kong, built the business up there, retired 8 years ago, I think, 8 years ago now. And I was really, really no good at retirement. And I was flying backwards and forwards to Hong Kong. But the businesses, were running as we wanted them. I invested in a couple of businesses here. We've got a nursing business and a sign making company here, and property. We invested in property over those years. But I didn't know what to do. I really didn't know what to do, Jeff. And somebody said to me, Gary, why don't you become a business consultant? And I said, I can never become a business consultant, because over the years I paid them, I don't know, maybe hundreds of thousands of pounds, or our companies had. They write me lovely reports. And where would they go, Jeff?
In the file.
Well, in the second drawer, right?
Yeah.
That I couldn't, don't give me a report, because I'm not going to read it. I constitutionally wouldn't read it. So then somebody said, why don't you become a coach? And I went, don't really know much about business coaching. Then somebody said, look at Action Coach. And I said, why would I look at Action Coach at this stage of my life? Why would I look at a franchise? And I looked at it, and, I looked at Action Coach, and it blew me away because, number one, I could see a system which would have saved me. I don't know, I'm very happy with the journey thus far. But really, it's been a fantastic journey in business. I love business. See, it's the ultimate obsession, because you can never know it all. The ultimate obsession is business. If you want to get a hobby, learn business, because you'll never outplay it. You'd never outgrow it, because it keeps changing. But I said to somebody, why would I look at a franchise at this stage of my life? And when I did look at that system, as I said, it just blew me away, because I could see something there that was, I can't say it's like summed up everything I've learned over those years, because there's huge amounts in that system that I'd never learned, frankly. I was too busy doing the job, building the businesses, but bludgeoning out 20 hours. And there was a price to pay in many areas of my life because of that. So I looked at it, I said, I'm in. And somebody asked me recently, why didn't I, I've never had a job. So I left home, I was 15, so that's 40 years ago. And I know I don't look 55, but it was, and so somebody said, why didn't you just do the Gary Keating School of Business? And I said, it's very easy, because everything I would be talking about, and everything, Jeff, you and I have talked about this before, we'd be talking about what happened there. I don't want to be telling you what happened to me 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I want to give you the passion, the empathy, and the hard coaching that you would expect as a person. But I want to actually be telling you what's going to happen down there. And therefore, as a business person, I don't want to be invested in that. I want Action Coach to give me that. I want the system so I can infuse that part of me, as I know you do with your clients. So
something I'm really curious about, Gary, is as coaches, we talk a lot about our clients having identity shifts, in that we're programmed during our upbringing parents and our teachers teach us stuff, and it sticks in, and it helps create our identity, and then we work with our clients to do that identity shift. But you seem to, from your upbringing, you didn't come from an entrepreneurial background. I think I remember you saying that your brothers and sisters haven't followed a similar path to you at all.
That's because I haven't got any.
Oh, okay. Well, definitely.
not that I know of, anyway.
To that bit. Okay, right. We'll edit that bit out. But your identity was the thing that kind of drove your ability to make those bold decisions at a very young, tender age. Where do you think that came from?
I think that's a really good question. I think that came from ultimately my mum was running betting shops. She didn't own them; she was running them, and she was one side of the counter. My dad was the other. I think watching my mum's boss, who was an entrepreneur, who's a very wealthy guy. I liked his car. I was very much into cars. I still am. So I think looking at that, I think looking at other successful people, I think my dad actually, in the right circumstances, would have been a fantastic business person. He had a fantastic personality, And, I think given the different opportunities or a different mindset, he would have been a fantastic business person. And so I think I think that there was just, and my grandfather told me, I remember my grandfather told me when I was very young, he said, "You can be prime minister of this country." Now, not that he wanted me to go into politics, right? My grandfather came from Ireland, so you'd call him an Irish immigrant then, but not that he wanted me to go into politics, but when you're told that, it shifts something in you because you remember it. Mm. And that's what we need to do to children is to really, if you can, and he shifted, I remember that for all my life. He shifted me to say somebody believed in this, councillor's kid that could do that. And I think that was a big shift. Mm. Jeff, if I can I say about another identity shift?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
There was another big identity shift that I absolutely had to infuse in myself, and it was difficult because obviously from that the values etc. would grow, and the beliefs would grow. But when up into the point where I failed in the music business in that first, when I felt up to that point where I failed in that first business, everything was a going towards situation. So because I'd not known failure, I don't see my childhood with having no money as a failure at all. But everything was an upward trajectory. So then when I lost everything, I had to then suddenly I realized that what kind of happened is the identity almost for a time, and this was not good, was just driven by a fear of failing. So the drive for a period of time just purely became, there was no going towards it. It was purely coming, trying to avoid coming from failure. And so the big identity change that I had to put in was to get both.
Yeah.
Was to never go back there again and go there. But don't stop me going there because of fear of going back there. Because otherwise that would have just become mediocrity, and maybe that would have just created financial security or whatever. Whereas
that's the zone that people get stuck in. The comfort zone is they get far enough away from the fire of poverty or whatever they're away from is that it is tolerable.
Yeah.
And if they've got no carrot to chase after, then they'll just sit in that place, won't they?
Absolutely. My experience, I think I was very lucky to make some money when I was younger, because there's a big difference once you've made it. You can go back and make it again, but what risks you have to take. Some people say to me, why do you think that a lot of business people don't become multimillionaires? And I have one really simple answer. The reason the majority of people don't become multimillionaires is because they make their first million. And once they've made their first million, they're done, a lot of them. Because they forget and they stop doing everything that got them to that first million. So they get to that first million, and then they go and put it away. And they try and go to multimillionaire status from maybe £250,000.
Yeah.
Or £100,000. So once it's a big thing. Once you get there, you've got to keep the habits. If you want the identity or the skills and the beliefs, that if you've made one, make five. But you're not going to go 1 + 1 + 1. You've got to leverage that. So the biggest thing that stops people becoming multimillionaires, or the biggest thing that stops people becoming multi-100,000aires, or whatever you call that, is they make that first one, that first 10,000, that first 100,000, that first million, or whatever it is. It's that mindset which will stop them multiplying sometimes.
And I've noticed myself get there as well, where I've got business to a certain level and gone, oh, well, this is all right. It was quite hard work to get it there. This is all right. I can have a couple of holidays there, and, we can have a few luxuries and things like that. And it was quite hard to get us here. So I'm just going to take a knee for a bit. I'll bring the business forward later. And then you just get stuck in that cycle then, don't you?
Absolutely. And I think that you can't, when you're in that cycle, one of the things we were talking about, one of the things that you can't, if you want to see how to fail, then be afraid of the future. Okay, be afraid of the future, or be afraid of the past. That's a great way to not succeed. Because if you're walking around being afraid of losing this or not getting, it's nuts, right? You know, it's about that mindset. It's going to happen, and I'm going to enjoy the journey. And I think what's also important is don't take time to think. You know, people do not take enough time to think about the business. When do the great things come in? They don't come in when we're on here. The great things, or me, will come in when we're taking time to think.
Yeah.
Or we're reading, or we're walking, or we're doing whatever. That's when those moments will come. So if you're just working in the business hour after hour after hour, you're not gonna get. We've all done it. We've got spiraled down into that sort of that miserable state where we're not giving ourselves time to think. You have to be successful. You have to give yourself time to think, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, what I say is that when quite often people say to me that they're working really hard in the business, but actually what they're doing is they're not working hard, they're working long. And they're working long hours. And I understand that's tiring and it's hard. It feels hard. But actually working hard is taking time out of the business to reflect on its strategic.
Absolutely.
You know, taking time is the hard stuff is to hire the right people or to fire the wrong people and to make those tough decisions. The good thing is that working hard doesn't have to take an awful long time, but working long does. But the reason people work long is because it's easier. It doesn't feel like it, but it is. It's the easy route.
And they see their value. You know, the person's here, the business is here. They see their value in the business. Whereas actually the real value is in the entrepreneur. See, a business is not an entrepreneur. The person is an entrepreneur, and the person needs to learn how to have maybe 1, 2, or 3 businesses.
Yeah.
But when the person puts everything into that business and thinks that makes it the entrepreneur, you know, that's the entrepreneurial. It's not. A business is not an entrepreneur. The person is. And so when the person wears everything in that business, and sometimes what you see is they got all their money in that business. They got all their value in that business. You know, imagine if you were having that conversation and you were the guy that ran Blockbuster. Yeah. Suddenly you say, well, I was worth this once, as I could say to you when I was 25, I was worth, where was it? Well, it was in that business, not in that person.
Yeah.
So people, you know, if they're working long hours in here, long hours, what time are they spending to become an entrepreneur and to learn how to run businesses, any business? So yeah, I agree. I think long is long.
So what advice would you give to that person then that's got their head in they're in the trenches, they're working really hard in the business might be growing, it's fine, they're doing okay, but then they really are the bottleneck in that business. What advice would you give them?
There's a lot. I think that's it's a great question. It's a big question. The biggest advice that I would say to them is, you know, just rest assured that they can do that for the rest of their life. So if they might take 3 or 6 months out to really look at what they could be and can be, and if it doesn't work for them, they can just go back to working entrenched for the rest of their life. You see, you can build a business in 5 years. You can get anywhere you want in 5 years. Some people can take 20 years and still not get there. So my advice to be, you know, is number one, live your dream. Make your dream your dreams. And what I mean by that is that there's enough to rob them of that. There's enough negative, you know, sometimes people take the negative comments forward. You know, internally in your innermost self, intuitively, how to get where you want to be. And you need to, for that, you need to be the boss of you and the boss of the business, not the business being the boss of you. And it is a mindset change, but don't worry. If you don't want to do it, you can go back to working in that business for 20 years and hopefully it will survive and you'll bludgeon out an income.
It doesn't sound as much fun.
Exactly. Not only is it not as much fun, you're not creating as many jobs. You're not changing so many people's lives. You're not changing the community. It's about working on, it's about living on purpose, isn't it? You know, are we perfect at it? No, of course we're not. But when you get your head up from the parapet and you think, you know, let's sell on purpose. Let's build the business on purpose. It's fun. It's a great legacy. You know, it's not just about leaving a financial legacy. It's about a legacy. It's about getting people to talk about what your story. it's about saying that this is not great, but this is what it is, and you take time to become the person that you can. Most people that go into business know that they can really do something special. Yes, people fall into it and they get the entrepreneurial seizures, it says in the E-Myth, but ultimately people know they've got that. And I believe that people in business have got a lot more in there than they let out. And the reason that many, many times they don't have time to do it.
No, they get trapped in.
It's nuts. Let's change it.
Let's. Brilliant. Gary, that's a great way to finish off the podcast today. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. I really appreciate it. I'm sure the listeners do too. Would you like to say goodbye?
Yeah, guys, thanks for listening to my ramblings. And thanks, Jeff, for inviting me onto this podcast. So take care. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.